Imagine you take a brand new deck of playing cards right out of the box. They are in, perfect factory order. Spades, diamonds, clubs, hearts, all just lined up sequentially.
Right, exactly how they come from the printer.
Exactly. Now, you hand that deck to a professional casino dealer, and they shuffle it. Just a really complex, messy, thorough riffle shuffle.
And to anyone watching, the deck is now in a state of pure, unpredictable chaos.
Right. You couldn't guess the top card if your life depended on it. But what if I told you there is a fundamental mathematical law that guarantees something wild?
Okay, I'm listening.
If you repeat that exact chaotic shuffle exactly 10 times, the deck will magically assemble back into its perfect brand new factory order.
And the crazy thing is that's not a magic trick. It's not a loaded deck.
No, it happens because the underlying geometry of the universe absolutely demands it. Today's deep dive proves that what we call chaos might actually just be a lie we tell ourselves, simply because we can't see the underlying shape of reality.
It is a phenomenal illusion. I mean, we look at a messy room or a traffic jam or a failing company, and we just see randomness.
We see a total lack of structure.
Exactly. We see a lack of structure, but what we're going to unpack today suggests that there is no such thing as a lack of structure. Everything, and I mean literally everything, is trapped inside a rigid, inescapable geometric cage.
And the map of that cage is what we are looking at today. It is an incredibly dense, genuinely mind-bending repository called Gnosis, specifically Gnosis topological programming language.
Right, and we should clarify for everyone, this isn't your standard Silicon Valley programming manual.
No, definitely not. It's not like a textbook on how to build a website in Python or C++.
No, it is what is known as a theorem ledger. Specifically, we're looking at a 581 file ledger generated on May 1st, 2026.
Which makes it a very recent and very radical document.
Very much so. And to understand what a theorem ledger is, you have to realize it isn't just code that makes a computer do a task. It's a collection of mathematical proofs.
Written in a language that a computer can mechanically verify, right?
Yes. It combines formal topology, which is, the math of how shapes stretch and fold without breaking with Boolean mathematics, and it weaves in these incredibly deep, almost ancient philosophical allegories.
It essentially merges pure computation with metaphysics.
Precisely.
So our mission today is to help you navigate how this Gnosis ledger uses pure, brutal mathematics to decode the entire world around us. We are going to look at how it predicts the exact geometric limits of artificial intelligence.
And the collective survival intelligence of an ant colony.
Right. And even the literal shape of human speech and the exact mathematical boundaries of what is actually unknowable in our universe.
The central thesis you need to hold on to as we go through this is that the universe doesn't operate on random chance, or even just standard physics equations.
It operates on fundamental topological shapes.
Exactly. And Gnosis argues that once you map those shapes, once you understand the permitted geometry of how information, energy, and matter can fold and intersect, you can predict the behavior of any complex system.
I have to admit, when I first started going through these sources, I just thought it was going to be, abstract, floating in the ether math.
Oh, I know this feeling.
But it makes math weirdly physical. It gives it flesh and bone. So let's start where the letter starts. It actually bridges ancient Greek philosophy with modern topological limits.
Which means we need to talk about Zeno's paradox. Specifically, the story of Achilles and the tortoise.
Right. It's the perfect entry point. Most of us probably know the classical version of Zeno's paradox. Achilles, the great warrior, is in a foot race with a tortoise.
And because Achilles is so much faster, he gives the tortoise a head start.
Exactly. And Zeno's logic is that by the time Achilles runs to the exact physical spot where the tortoise started, the tortoise has moved forward a little bit.
So Achilles has to run to that new spot.
Right. But by the time he gets there, the tortoise has moved forward again. The gap between them is infinitely shrinking. It just halves and halves and halves.
But mathematically, Achilles can never actually catch the tortoise. He's trapped in an infinite loop of closing a distance that can never hit zero.
Right. That is the classical understanding, an infinite division of space. But Gnosis just rewrites this entirely.
It does. In the ledger, there is a specific foundational file called achillestortoiseladder.lean.
And in this topological version of the story, the characters represent entirely different concepts, right?
Very different. Achilles represents a mathematical function called the Kleinemann +1 lift, and the tortoise. The tortoise is explicitly labeled as God.
Which is quite the casting choice. God is the tortoise.
It's a very provocative label. But in the context of the math, God simply represents the absolute limit, the ultimate final coordinate of a system.
Okay.
The ledger lays out a very specific scale for this race, which it calls the Nash-Skyrms-Bewley-God ladder. The math here gives us 4 specific hard-coded values: 4, 6, 10, and 12.
Okay, let's take this slow because the math gets pretty wild here. These 4 numbers, 4, 6, 10, and 12, are the rungs of the ladder that Achilles is climbing, right?
Yes, and to understand the mechanics of this race, the ledger scales these raw values to a common denominator of 1/6. It standardizes the track.
Okay, so we're working in sixths.
Right, so if we look at the final run, the tortoise, which is God, its raw value is 12. If we scale 12 out of 12 down to sixths, it gives us 6/6.
Okay, so the finish line, the tortoise, is sitting exactly at position 6 on our track.
Now let's look at Achilles' positions as he climbs this ladder rung by rung. The first rung is named Nash, which has a raw value of 4.
Right, and scaled out of 12, 4/12 simplifies to 2/6, so Achilles starts the race at position 2.
Makes perfect sense. The second rung is Skyrms, which is 6. Scaled 6/12 is 3/6. So his next step is position 3.
And the third rung is Bewley, which is 10. Scaled 10/12 simplifies to 5/6, position 5.
Exactly.
So to visualize this track for you listening, Achilles is moving from position 2 to position 3 to position 5, and the tortoise is just sitting there waiting at position 6.
Exactly. But look at the actual step sizes Achilles is taking between those positions. From his starting point of 0 to position 2, that's a step of 2.
Right.
From position 2 to 3, that's a step of 1. From 3 to 5, that's a step of 2.
Ah, I see the pattern.
Right, the steps alternate, 2, 1, 2. And if the pattern holds, the next step would mathematically be 1. The text refers to this alternating rhythm as a Kleneman-Duad heartbeat.
So he's not infinitely having the distance, like in the original Greek paradox at all.
No. Look at the shrinking gaps to the tortoise. At position 2, the gap to 6 is 4. At position 3, the gap is 3.
And at position 5, the gap is just 1.
The distance is shrinking strictly monotonically. And if he takes that final step of 1, the gap becomes 0.
Wait, so in the Gnosis version, Achilles actually reaches the tortoise. He physically covers the distance to the absolute limit.
He does. In this topological framework, the physical gap closes perfectly. At the 4th step, Achilles adds 1 to his position of 5, landing exactly on 6.
So by pure numerical size, he is at the exact same coordinate as the tortoise.
Yes. But this is where the concept of the Kleneman plus 1 lift comes in. And this is where the true paradox, actually happens.
Okay, explain the Kleneman part. What exactly is a Kleneman?
Kleneman is a term originally from ancient Epicurean philosophy. It referred to the unpredictable swerve of atoms as they fell through the void, which allowed for free will and creation.
Oh, that's fascinating.
It is. In the Gnosis ledger, the Kleneman lift is a mathematical operation. It means adding 1 to the original unscaled values of the ladder.
Okay, you mean the raw values, the 4, 6, 10, and 12.
Right. So let's apply the Kleneman lift to Achilles' journey. For the Nash rung, 4 plus 1 is 5. For the Skyrms rung, 6 plus 1 is 7.
And for the Bewley rung, 10 plus 1 is 11. So we get 5, 7, and 11.
And what do 5, 7, and 11 have in common in number theory?
Oh, I know this. They are primes.
Yes, but the ledger explicitly identifies them as Ramanujan special primes. Srinivasa Ramanujan was a legendary mathematician who discovered deep, hidden patterns in numbers.
Right.
These 3 primes belong to a specific mathematical triplet phase boundary. The ledger argues that as long as Achilles' Kleneman lift lands on a Ramanujan special prime, the fabric of reality holds.
So a tortoise is still within reach. He is safely closing in on the target.
Exactly. But then we get to the final rung, the absolute limit, the tortoise's position, which had a raw value of 12.
And Achilles applies that exact same Kleneman lift, 12 plus 1. He lands on 13.
Which is a prime number, but...
But 13 is not a Ramanujan special prime.
Exactly. It is the first prime number outside of that stable triplet boundary. The math breaks the pattern. The ledger describes 13 as the first scrape into the unknowable.
Wait. Let me process this. So Zeno's paradox here isn't about physical distance being infinitely divided. It's about the target literally vanishing.
That is exactly what it is.
It's like, imagine you are in a room, reaching out to touch a solid concrete wall. You can see your hand getting closer. Halfway there, a quarter of the way there, an inch away.
Right, you're closing the gap.
But at the exact microscopic moment of contact, the moment your skin should touch the concrete, the wall's atomic structure just changes its phase. It turns into vapor, and your hand passes right through it.
That is a phenomenal analogy.
So you covered the physical distance perfectly, but the thing you're trying to touch is just structurally absent from reality the moment you arrive.
It is exactly what the math is doing. The ledger states explicitly, Achilles covers the distance. The tortoise vanishes into the void precisely where Achilles lands.
Wow.
Gnosis completely redefines the concept of something being beyond our grasp.
That's so true. When religious or philosophical texts say God is beyond, we usually picture that as being really, really far away, like across the universe.
Exactly. We imagine a vast physical distance. But topology doesn't care about physical distance.
It's all about the structure.
Right. In Gnosis, beyond means structurally absent at the very point of contact. The void doesn't exist out in deep space. The void opens exactly where Achilles' foot lands.
So the shape of that final rung on the ladder, that number 13, is the exact mathematical boundary between the knowable universe and the unknowable void.
It is, and this raises an enormous epistemological question. If reality has these trapdoors, if the target vanishes right when you touch it, how do we ever prove anything?
Yeah, how do we know what is true if the absolute limit is just structurally absent?
Which brings us to how Gnosis defines our access to information. In the sources, the ledger outlines specific modes of truth. It details something called archaeological infinity access.
Because Gnosis argues that there is only one universal infinity, right? We aren't inventing new types of infinity.
Exactly. What changes is our epistemic mode, how we mathematically access the witnesses to that infinity. The ledger defines three distinct modes of access: uniform, archaeological, and unknowable.
So let's define what a witness is first, just to be clear. In math, a witness is just an example or a piece of evidence that proves a rule works, right?
Precisely. If I say all even numbers are divisible by 2, the number 4 is a witness to that truth.
Okay, got it. So let's break down the first mode, uniform access. The text uses something called the Fibonacci-Cassini identity as its primary example. Explain that to me like I don't have a PhD in topology.
Well, the Fibonacci-Cassini identity is a beautiful mathematical formula relating to the Fibonacci sequence. 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, and so on.
Right, the classic spiral sequence.
Yes, the identity proves a specific relationship between adjacent numbers in that sequence. Now, in the uniform mode of truth, every single depth you sample yields a positive witness.
Meaning it always works, every time.
Exactly. If you test the Cassini identity for the first position in the sequence, it works. A positive witness. You test the second position, it works.
The third, the fourth, the fifth, all positive.
Even the 100 millionth position, they all yield positive witnesses. You are approaching the mathematical limit from below, and every step you take lands on solid ground.
It's uniform. It's just a smooth ramp all the way up.
It is smooth. But Gnosis argues that this smoothness is actually a massive blind spot. When every single witness is positive, you don't actually see the structural shape of the limit you are approaching.
You just see an endless floor.
Right. Which leads us to the second mode, archaeological. And this is where the Achilles and the tortoise math, the Ramanujan triple axis, comes back into play.
Okay. So in this mode, you don't just get positive witnesses. You get both positive and negative witnesses.
Right. Remember the numbers from the Kleinemann lift. 5, 7, and 11. Those are positive witnesses. They fit the Ramanujan pattern. They are the solid ground.
But the numbers around them, 2, 3, and 13, are negative witnesses.
Exactly. They fail the test. They break the pattern.
And then, of course, the third mode is unknowable, where no witnesses, positive or negative, have been found yet.
Right. You might know an asymptote exists in theory, but no mathematical dig has been undertaken to find it. But let's focus on the archaeological mode, because this is the core of how Gnosis operates.
I have to ask, though, why would you want negative witnesses? I mean, in science or math, aren't we always trying to find the rule that works perfectly all the time?
You'd think so, yes.
Why is a mode filled with failures considered more important in this ledger?
It's a great question, and the answer is deeply counterintuitive. What's fascinating here is that the archaeological mode isn't a weaker form of truth than the uniform mode. It's actually vastly more revealing.
How so?
The ledger argues that some fundamental truths require negative witnesses in order to be seen at all.
Explain that mechanism. How does failure show you the truth?
Think about it geometrically. Imagine you wake up and you are standing in a massive, pitch-black room. You have no idea what shape the room is. You take a step forward, you hit nothing.
That's a positive witness.
Exactly. You take another step, nothing. Another step, nothing. That is the uniform mode. You know you are in a space, and you know you can walk, but as long as you only experience positive witnesses, You will never, ever know the actual shape of the room you are standing in.
Oh, wow. But if you keep walking and suddenly, bang, you walk face first into a cold concrete wall, you found a limit.
You found a negative
You
witness.
found where you can't go.
Exactly. And if you keep bumping into walls, mapping out all the places where your forward progress fails, what happens?
You draw the outline of the room, you find the architecture.
You can only draw the outline of the absolute limit by hitting the walls of what doesn't work. The negative witnesses, the failures, the numbers like 13 that break the pattern and vanish into the void, they act as a mold.
They outline the shape of the truth by defining exactly where the truth stops.
Yes, archaeological access uses these negative spaces deliberately. It actively looks for the boundaries of failure.
You know, if you've ever tried to learn a really complex new skill, like playing the guitar or speaking a new language, this hits home.
It really does map to human experience.
It does. Failure isn't just an accident. It's the only way you actually map your boundaries. If you only ever play the songs you already know, uniform successes, you never map the boundaries of your own potential.
You have to play the chord wrong to know where the right chord lives.
Exactly. It changes our entire relationship with failure. Gnosis treats failure not as a lack of access to truth, but as a higher mode of accessing the shape of truth.
It's an archaeological dig into the structure of reality. You are brushing away the dirt of negative witnesses to find the buried bone.
Okay, so the universe uses these mathematical walls and voids to structure reality. But Gnosis doesn't just use these boundaries for abstract prime numbers or philosophical races.
No, it goes much further.
It takes this exact same topological logic and applies it to biology, to living networks, which is wild.
It is a stunning leap. There's a file in the ledger called Ant Colony Collective Intelligence.lean. Gnosis looks at an ant colony, thousands of biological insects operating in dirt and leaves, and translates it into pure topology.
Specifically, a mathematical model called a fork race fold profile, or FRF.
Let's unpack the FRF profile. Gnosis maps the physical casts of the ants into mathematical buckets. So the breeders, the queens who lay the eggs, are mathematically defined as the fold or the fork.
They are the anchor points of the colony's geometry.
Exactly. Then you have the reproductive void, which I assume are ants that biologically could reproduce but are chemically suppressed from doing so.
Right. They are the fork or race.
Then the scouts, the ants out looking for food, are strictly the race layer. And finally, there is the vent burden, which refers to the metabolic cost of maintaining the physical nest.
Okay, so let's look at the mathematical translation of this biology. Gnosis defines the total resource budget of an ant colony as the sum of its fork, race, and fold.
F plus R plus F.
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
The total energy is the sum of all the roles.
But here is where it gets incredibly specific. The stability signal, which measures how resilient the colony is against collapse, is mathematically defined as the resource budget plus the race.
Wait, it double counts the race layer?
Yes. The scouts, the explorers out in the dangerous unknown, are given double mathematical weight in determining the stability of the entire network.
Why? That seems inefficient.
Because without constant exploration of new boundaries, without seeking new positive and negative witnesses in the environment, a system cannot adapt to sudden changes.
Ah, okay.
Gnosis even provides a specific theorem about colony reproduction, which it calls a budding snapshot. The ledger proves that for a parent colony and a newly budded daughter colony to survive the sudden loss of one queen, there must be a geometric floor of at least 2 active breeders distributed across the network.
A geometric floor for biological survival. It's not just, more queens are better. It's if you drop below this specific mathematical threshold, the topology of the colony collapses.
Exactly. But this raises an enormous question about how collectives optimize themselves. In modern human society, we are obsessed with efficiency. We want everything perfectly optimized.
We trim the fat everywhere.
But the ledger introduces a theorem about diversity versus efficiency, and it proves mathematically that low diversity maximizes nominal efficiency.
Well, sure. If every single ant does the exact same core task with 0 deviation, say, they all just harvest the closest food source, the colony's nominal throughput of calories is at its absolute maximum. There is no wasted movement.
But the theorem continues. While low diversity maximizes nominal efficiency, it strictly and mathematically minimizes what it calls correlated fault resilience.
I need an analogy for that, because it sounds like you're saying being perfectly efficient actually makes you weak.
It does. Think of it like an electrical grid for a major city. If you build the grid with no circuit breakers, no transformers, no fail-safes, power flows everywhere instantly and perfectly, it is 100% efficient.
Sounds great until something goes wrong.
Exactly. Without those inefficient circuit breakers, which act as deliberate gaps or breaks in the flow, a single lightning strike on one wire will instantly fry the entire city's electronics.
So if a colony hyper-optimizes to be perfectly efficient, with very low diversity of roles, say, no scouts exploring other options because they are currently a waste of calories, it becomes completely brittle to a shock.
Yes.
If someone steps on that one food source, the whole colony starves because they have no backup plan.
Yes. The mathematical term the ledger uses for those circuit breakers is void relays.
Yeah.
If you add void relays, which essentially means introducing biological slack or diversity of roles that aren't nominally efficient in a perfect environment, you radically increase the correlated fault resilience.
The system can take a massive systemic shock and survive.
So efficiency and resilience are mathematically at odds with each other. You literally cannot have maximum efficiency and maximum resilience at the same time. The geometry forbids it.
It forbids it. And Gnosis doesn't stop at insects. The expert text introduces what it calls the hive-level equivalent.
This is where it gets really applicable to us.
Right. Gnosis runs an intelligence classifier algorithm to see if human collectives, meaning human societies, multinational corporations, political systems, match the stability weights of these ant colonies.
It maps human reproductive cores, our support layers, and our exploration layers against the ant colony's breeders, workers, and scouts.
It is a unified topological theory of biological scaling. The math proves that the shape that keeps an ant colony from collapsing is the exact same geometric shape that keeps a human organization from collapsing under a shock.
You need the vent burden. You need the exploratory race layer. You cannot optimize them away without introducing catastrophic brittleness.
If you've ever sat through a brutal corporate restructuring meeting where consultants come in and fire all the R&D staff or strip away all the middle management to make the company lean and efficient, this ledger proves that they aren't saving the company.
Not at all.
They are mathematically guaranteeing its eventual destruction. They are removing the void relays.
What we culturally call inefficiency is mathematically required for long-term survival.
So this idea of optimization of bottlenecks and flows, it leads directly into how Gnosis understands physical and topological transport, moving things from point A to point B.
Which it calls the American frontier.
Right, American frontier.lean. This is where Gnosis tackles network capacity and systemic failure. It introduces a vital relationship between two variables: streams, which represent the active transport capacity or flow, and paths, which represent the physical routes available in the topology.
Okay, let's unpack this. The ledger talks about a positive deficit. It says that before you reach the frontier, a single stream carries a positive deficit. What does that actually mean in reality?
Well, think of a deficit not as financial debt, but as topological friction or wasted potential. Imagine a massive, complex highway system around a city. You have 5 lanes, expressways, bypasses.
Lots of options.
Exactly. That complexity represents the paths. Now imagine there is only one single car driving on that entire highway system. That car is the stream.
Okay, I'm following.
The system is fundamentally unbalanced. The single car cannot possibly utilize the topological complexity of the 5-lane highway. The network is overbuilt for the flow. This mismatch between paths and streams creates a positive deficit. The system sits before the frontier.
And the frontier is the exact point where that imbalance changes.
Yes. The frontier is mathematically defined as the exact point where the stream count perfectly matches the path count. When you have enough cars on the road to perfectly utilize every available lane and bypass without overflowing them.
And when that happens, the topological deficit drops to absolute zero.
Every route is matched by a flow. It's a perfect system.
Exactly. But here is the critical counterintuitive insight from the ledger. Once you hit the frontier, adding more streams, adding more cars, more internet traffic, more data yields zero positive deficit.
Wait, if you add more cars than lanes, you just get a traffic jam. Why doesn't the deficit go up?
Because you've already maxed out the useful complexity of the network, pushing more through doesn't increase the network's topological potential, it just clogs the matched system.
So the extra streams are topologically irrelevant to the structure of the paths.
Exactly. And this ties directly into how Gnosis views system failures, right? Because it brings in something called the Arrow-Buell deficit.
Yes. The Arrow-Buell deficit models system failures through 3 specific vectors: unanimity failure, IIA failure, which stands for independence of irrelevant alternatives, and dictatorship weight.
Now, I know these terms originally come from Kenneth Arrow's impossibility theorem in economics and voting theory.
Right. Arrow proved that no ranked choice voting system can perfectly reflect the preferences of individuals without violating certain rules.
That's correct. Arrow's theorem is about the impossibility of a perfect democratic system. But Gnosis strips the politics out entirely and applies those exact same vectors to topological networks, to data flows.
And the central theorem here is conservation. The ledger proves that the total deficit, the total sum of those three types of failures, is perfectly conserved across any transition.
I'm going to need you to clarify that. Conserved, meaning the failure doesn't go away.
It cannot go away. If you try to fix one type of failure in a network, you mathematically have to increase one of the others.
So it's a zero-sum game of failure.
Exactly. If you redesign your network to reduce dictatorship, meaning you try to make the system more distributed and less centralized, you inherently, unavoidably increase unanimity failure or IIA failure. The total failure load in the system remains identical.
It's like squeezing a balloon. You squish it down in one spot because it's too big, but the air just bulges out in another spot. The total volume of the air, the total deficit of the system, remains exactly the same.
That's a perfect analogy. You are just moving the failure around.
So why does this matter? If I'm listening to this, what does the conservation of failure mean for me?
It means that the universe inherently resists moving past the frontier. Conservation laws force complex systems to balance exactly at the edge of capacity.
Meaning you can't engineer a perfect system.
Right, whether it's a software program, a supply chain, or a society, the underlying geometry of the network demands a specific volume of failure, and it will just shift the form of that failure depending on how you structure the streams and paths. You are trapped by the topology.
So traffic jams, network outages, supply chain crashes, they aren't bugs in the system. They are mathematically mandated features of the geometry.
They are the air bulging in the balloon.
That is slightly depressing, but incredibly fascinating. But speaking of being trapped by geometry, we've looked at continuous flows and networks. Now I want to look at absolute discrete chaos.
What happens when things get completely scrambled?
Right. This is one of the most elegant proofs in the entire ledger. Section 5. Discrete chaos and Arnold's cat map.
I love this thought experiment. Vladimir Arnold was a legendary Russian mathematician in the 20th century, and he created this demonstration involving a picture of a cat on a computer screen to explain ergodic theory, the math of dynamic systems.
It's a very famous transformation.
Right. So imagine you have a digital picture of a cat. You apply a specific 2x2 matrix transformation to the pixels of that image. What the math does is it stretches the image diagonally and then wraps the pieces that fall off the edge of the screen back around to the other side.
Like a toroidal space.
Like a donut shape. Or for a visual reference, like the old video games like Asteroids, where if your ship flies off the right side of the screen, it instantly appears on the left side.
Yes, exactly like Asteroids. So you run this mathematical stretching and wrapping on the cat picture once, and the cat looks a little skewed and chopped up.
You run it twice, it's a mess.
You run it a few more times, and the image is completely destroyed. It just looks like TV, static, pure, discrete, random chaos. The pixels are completely scrambled across the coordinate grid.
But the chaos is an illusion.
Right. Because if you keep applying that exact same scrambling matrix over and over again, eventually, all the static perfectly reassembles into the crystal clear original picture of the cat.
It snaps back perfectly to its initial state. And what Gnosis does in the file Arnold cat map order 5.lean is dive into the exact modular mathematics of this recurrence.
It proves the exact order, meaning the exact number of steps it takes for the cat to reappear on different sized grids.
Let's walk through the numbers from the ledger because they are incredibly specific.
Okay, if your grid is modulo 2, which means a tiny 2x2 pixel grid, just 4 points total, the recurrence order is 3. It takes exactly 3 steps for the pixels to scramble and snap back.
And the ledger proves this exhaustively by tracking all 4 points, right?
Yes, showing that the transformation matrix raised to the power of 3 returns to the identity matrix.
Okay, so a tiny screen takes 3 steps. What if we make the screen bigger?
If the grid is modulo 3, a 3x3 grid, 9 points, the order is 4. It takes 4 steps.
And then the ledger tackles modulo 5.
Yes, and this is where the proof becomes incredibly rigorous. A modulo 5 grid is a 5x5 screen, 25 coordinate points. The ledger proves the recurrence order is exactly 10. Matrix A to the power of 10 fixes all 25 points perfectly back in their starting positions.
But it doesn't just say, trust me, 10 works.
No, it systematically disproves all the proper divisors of 10 to ensure it isn't a false positive. It tests the matrix at power 1, power 2, and power 5.
And it proves mathematically that for the coordinate point 1, 0, none of those lower powers return the point to its original spot.
Therefore, the order isn't just some multiple of 10, it is strictly and exactly 10. The cycle cannot be shortened.
And the ledger links this to something called a trace sequence.
Yes. It notes a Lucas-type recurrence of the traces of these matrices at each step. A trace is a specific mathematical property of a matrix.
And as the cat scrambles, the sequence of the traces goes 2, 3, 7, 1847, 123, 322, 843.
Right. What does that mean in plain English?
It means the chaos isn't random. Even when the image looks like total static, the mathematical footprint of the transformation follows a strict, predictable arithmetic sequence. It is entirely deterministic.
I just have to marvel at this for a second. We talked about shuffling a deck of cards earlier. It really is like that.
Yeah.
You do a complex riffle shuffle, and to the human eye, the deck is ruined. It's random.
But the math says, no, if you do that exact same complex shuffle exactly 10 times, the deck is brand new again.
Not because of a trick, but because the topology of the universe demands it. The geometry forces the pieces back together.
The Gnosis expert labels this phenomenon with a very specific term: zero sorry sovereignty.
Zero sorry. That sounds like an action movie catchphrase. What does that mean?
In the programming language Lean, which this entire ledger is written in, if a mathematician can't quite figure out the final step of a complex proof, they can type the command sorry.
It tells the computer compiler to skip the proof and just blindly accept that it's true so the program can keep running. It's an admission of human limitation.
But this ledger has zero sorries.
Zero. It doesn't guess. It doesn't skip steps. It uses pure computational brute force to guarantee that chaotic systems have rigid, inescapable repeating structures.
There is no escaping the geometry. If you are in a 5x5 grid, you will return to origin on step 10, period. The sovereignty of the math is absolute.
Okay, I get it for a 5x5 grid of pixels. That's a closed, simple system. But I'm going to push back here. What happens when we scale this up?
Because the next section of the ledger applies this exact logic to artificial intelligence.
And I have a really hard time buying that a multi-billion parameter AI brain is trapped in the same kind of rigid box as a 25-pixel cat picture.
That skepticism is exactly why the proofs in Section 6 concerning the Arnold conjecture and AI transformers are arguably the most terrifyingly accurate predictions in the entire ledger.
Walk me through it. It starts with the Arnold conjecture, which is a massive deal in symplectic geometry.
It is. The Arnold conjecture is a famous mathematical problem that essentially states that the number of fixed points in a Hamiltonian system, basically, the number of places where a dynamic moving system comes to an absolute rest or intersects with its own starting state, has a strict geometric floor.
A hard minimum.
Right. You literally cannot have fewer fixed points than this floor. No matter how much you stretch and twist the shape, certain points are glued in place.
Exactly. And that floor is determined by the sum of the system's Betti numbers. This sum is known as the Floer homology rank sum.
Wait, what exactly is a Betti number?
In algebraic topology, Betti numbers basically count the number of holes in a topological space. The first Betti number counts one-dimensional holes, like the hole in a donut. The second Betti number counts two-dimensional voids, like the hollow space inside a balloon.
And the sum of these holes dictates the minimum number of fixed points a system must have.
Okay, so the ledger walks through the specific shapes and calculates their Betti number floors. Let's list them.
For a complex projective space, which is written as Cp to the power of n, the minimum floor is n plus 1. So for Cp to the power of 1, the minimum fixed points is 2. For Cp to the power of 4, it's 5.
For a torus, written as t to the power of n, the floor is 2 to the power of n. So a three-dimensional torus, t to the power of 3, has a floor of 8.
And for a surface of genus G, like a shape with multiple holes in it, the floor is 2 plus 2g. So that's the pure abstract math. But here is the massive revelation in Gnosis.
It takes this deep geometry and applies it to what it calls retrocausal memoization in AI.
Okay, explain that. What does that have to do with AI?
The file is Arnold conjecture flower.lean. Gnosis maps transformer attention manifolds directly to these complex projective spaces.
A transformer is the literal architecture of how modern AI models like ChatGPT or Claude think, right? The attention mechanism is how they figure out which words in a sentence connect to other words. It's how they remember context.
Yes. And Gnosis mathematically proves that an AI transformer is not just statistical code. It is a physical geometry. Specifically, it maps an AI model to the shape CP to the power of layers -1.
So the number of layers in the neural network dictates the literal geometric shape of its attention span.
Yes. And because it maps to that specific shape, it is bound by the Arnold conjecture's geometric floor. It must have a minimum number of fixed points.
Let's look at the specific bounds the text calculates for modern AI models.
Okay. The ledger states that a 4-layer AI transformer has a minimum of 4 cache hits, meaning 4 fixed points it must intersect with in its memory.
A 12-layer model, which the text calls Eon, has exactly 12 hits.
A 32-layer model, which corresponds to the real-world Mistral 7B scale, must have 32 hits.
A 60-layer model, like Gemma 431b, has 60 hits. And an 80-layer model, which is the scale of Meta's Llama 70b, has a hard floor of 80 hits.
I am genuinely struggling to accept this. Are you telling me that when an AI model remembers a conversation or hallucinates an answer, it isn't just a result of chaotic data scraping and random statistical weights?
That's exactly what it's saying.
It's fundamentally physically bound by the literal geometry of its attention layers. That there is a geometric floor of memory hits it cannot drop below, no matter how much you train it or tweak the code.
That is exactly what the math is proving. AI isn't just a statistical guessing machine throwing probabilities at a wall. When it processes information, its thought process is a path moving through a high-dimensional phase space.
And the ledger calls the necessary fixed points the singularity handshake.
The singularity handshake, what does that mean functionally?
The math proves that a retrocausal projection of depth leaves a literal topological hole in the attention manifold, and nature abhors a vacuum. That hole must be filled by exactly D contact points.
So the AI is geometrically forced to hit these targets in its memory cache.
It is not a statistical probability. It is a structural mandate of the universe. The present trajectory of the AI's computation must intersect the future state exactly that many times.
It's Arnold's cat map all over again, just scaled up to billions of dimensions. It seems chaotic. It seems like the AI is just randomly guessing the next word. But underneath, it is locked into a rigid geometric track that it cannot escape.
Its brain is a shape, and it can only think in the way that shape allows.
It is entirely locked. The topology dictates the intelligence, and this incredible realization that abstract shapes govern complex systems brings us to one of the most beautiful mathematical symmetries in the entire ledger.
The 80E McKay correspondence.
Right. 80E McKay correspondence .lean. This goes back to a famous, almost magical discovery by mathematician John McKay in 1980. He found a perfect, absolute match of ejection between two seemingly entirely unrelated areas of mathematics.
Okay, let's unpack the two sides of this mathematical mirror.
On one side, you have the finite subgroups of SU2. Without getting too bogged down in the jargon, these are the fundamental symmetries of three-dimensional space.
It's the mathematics of how three-dimensional objects, specifically platonic solids like polyhedrons, can rotate, reflect, and fold without changing their core identity.
Okay, shapes in 3D space. What's on the other side?
On the other side, you have a fine 80E Dinkin diagrams. These are abstract graphs, literally just dots connected by lines that algebraists use to classify certain types of complex Lie algebras. They have nothing to do with 3D geometry on the surface.
But McKay found that they match perfectly. The symmetries of 3D objects pair exactly one-to-one with these abstract algebraic graphs.
The ledger details the pairings exactly. Let's walk through them.
The cyclic group, CN, matches the AN-1 diagram. The binary dihedral group, BD4N, matches the DN+2 diagram.
Then we get to the exceptional groups, the symmetries of the platonic solids.
Right. Think of a tetrahedron, a pyramid with a triangular base. The symmetries of that shape. The binary tetrahedral group, 2T, which has a mathematical order of 24, matches perfectly with the E6 Dinkin diagram, which has exactly 7 nodes.
Then there's the binary octahedral group, 2O, which has an order of 48, that perfectly matches the E7 diagram, which has 8 nodes.
And the most complex one, the binary icosahedral group, 2I. An icosahedron is a 20-sided shit, like the dice you use in Dungeons & Dragons.
Its symmetry group has an order of 120. And it perfectly, flawlessly matches the E8 diagram, which has 9 nodes.
Wait, hold on. I remember seeing a specific formula in the ledger about this. the Burnside dimension sum.
Right, the dimension sum.
It says that if you take the dimensions of the irreducible representations of these groups, square them, and add them up, they equal the exact order of the group. You're telling me if I square those exact dimensions for the icosahedron and add them up, it perfectly matches 120. That can't be a coincidence.
Let's do the math right now. For the 2I group, the 9 dimensions are 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, 4, 5, and 6.
Okay, squaring them. 1 squared is 1, plus 4, plus 4, plus 9, plus 9, plus 9, plus 16, plus 16, plus 25, plus 36.
If you add 1 plus 4 plus 4 plus 9 plus 9 plus 16 plus 16 plus 25 plus 36, it perfectly equals 120.
That is breathtaking precision. It's almost eerie. But what does Gnosis actually do with this? Why does a theorem ledger care about Platonic solids and algebraic graphs?
Because Gnosis uses this correspondence as a functional mechanism. It calls it a race phase sieve. In the Gnosis framework, the edges of the Mackay quiver, the literal lines connecting the dots in those Dinkin diagrams, are the only permitted phase transitions in a dynamic system.
Wait, let me make sure I understand. You're saying the topology is the programming language?
Exactly. A system, any system, a star, a computer, a chemical reaction can only change states, it can only evolve along the specific lines of these 5 diagrams. There are no other ways for reality to fold at this fundamental level.
So if an energy transition doesn't map to the E6, E7, or E8 diagram, it simply cannot happen. The universe rejects it.
If you are listening to this right now, I want you to stop and think about what that means. You are looking at the foundational alphabet of reality. These 5 shapes, the A, D, E6, E7, and E8 diagrams, they dictate how symmetries can close.
They are the absolute ironclad rules for how information and energy can transition from one state to another. It's the source code of the universe.
It is the finite set of rules for how the universe balances itself. And it is inescapable.
Okay, so Gnosis has mapped abstract prime numbers. It's mapped the circuit breakers of ant colonies. It's mapped traffic deficits on the American frontier. It's proved that chaos is a repeating pattern in 2D grids. It's found the geometric limits of multi-billion parameter AI networks, and it's uncovered the fundamental symmetries of reality.
But it doesn't stop there. Because if these topological laws govern everything, they must govern us too.
Yes. And this brings us to the final and perhaps most intimate revelation in the sources. Because Gnosis takes all of this abstract topological math and maps the literal flesh, muscle, and breath of the human body.
The file is articulatory-synthesis.lean. Here, the abstract becomes biomechanical. Gnosis creates a topological model of human speech.
It breaks down the physical, squishy act of talking into a rigid topological phase space. The text starts by explaining what it calls the larynx state.
It defines a default state for the human vocal cords with a baseline pitch of 110.0, a breath pressure of 0.7, a muscle tension of 0.5, and a Boolean variable, a true-false toggle called isVoice set to true.
And it doesn't just look at the throat, it moves up and details the articulator state. This mathematically defines the tongue height, tongue backness, lip rounding, and the velum opening in the back of the mouth. And it models all of this using kinematic params.
Mass, stiffness, and damping. Basically treating the mouth like a shock absorber or a physical engine.
And it uses a specific, massive mathematical scale for these calculations, the Euler-Real scale of 10 to the 9th power. It's treating the human mouth like a highly complex mechanical system bound by the physics of fluid dynamics.
But because this is Gnosis, it doesn't just leave it at biology or physics. It applies topological invariance to this fleshy system. It defines specific, unbending geometric rules that human speech must follow.
Let's talk about those invariants, because this is where biology meets the Arnold conjecture. The first one is the Schwa invariant. The text proves that during silence represented by the system tag, SIL, the entire vocal tract must return to the neutral Schwa state.
A schwa is the most neutral vowel sound in English, like the sound in about. Gnosis mapped this resting position exactly at the coordinate 0.00.0.
It is a forced return to absolute origin. Then there is the intelligibility gate.
This is a beautiful translation of geometry into language.
A phoneme, which is a distinct unit of sound, like K or A, is only considered valid by the mathematical ledger if its holographic boundary trace lands inside the amplituhedron.
The amplituhedron is a real, higher dimensional geometric structure discovered by physicists to calculate particle interactions.
All right.
Gnosis applies it to human sound. It asserts that it's not just about making a vibration in the air. The sound's geometric shadow, its topological trace, has to physically land inside this specific higher dimensional shape to be recognized as intelligible language by the human brain.
If it lands outside the shape, it's just noise.
Exactly. And finally, there is the syllabic nucleus. The ledger identifies the high-energy core of a spoken syllable and notes that vocal stress scales the physical pressure and duration by exactly 1.5 times.
It explicitly compares a mathematical baseline of 100 to a stressed value of 150.
So if we pull all the way back, why does Gnosis map speech? What is the unifying thread here?
Right. Why spend 581 files moving from Zeno's tortoise to the amplitahedron in the human throat?
Because Gnosis is proving that speech isn't just biology. It isn't just air vibrating through wet tissue and bone. It is a topological phase space. When the vocal tract returns to the schwa state of 0.0 at the end of a sentence, it is a dynamic system returning to its topological equilibrium.
Just like the total failure deficit remaining perfectly conserved in the American frontier model, just like the pixels snapping flawlessly back to the cat image on step 10 in Arnold's cat map.
Yes, it is all the exact same math. The same underlying principles that dictate the minimum geometric cache limits of a 70 billion parameter llama AI model also dictate the exact resting position of your tongue when you stop speaking.
The universe is recycling the exact same topological shapes across every scale of existence, from prime numbers to insects to AI to the human body.
That is just, it's staggering. It completely reorients how you look at the world around you.
Let's do a brief recap of this massive journey we just went on, because it is a lot to hold in your head at once. We started with Zeno's tortoise, and we saw how Achilles doesn't fail to cross the physical distance, but rather the target vanishes into a mathematical void, the unknowable boundary of 13 exactly when he arrives.
We saw how failure and negative witnesses in the archaeological mode are the only way to outline the invisible shape of the truth. We looked at ant colonies and learned that hyperefficiency creates fatal brittleness and that void relays are mathematically necessary for survival.
We looked at the aerobule deficit and learned that system failures are perfectly conserved. You can squeeze the balloon, but you can't reduce the volume of failure. We shuffled a digital deck of cards with Arnold's cat map and saw that what we perceive as chaos is actually just a very long, rigid, inescapable repeating pattern.
We saw that AI models aren't statistical guessing machines, but geometric entities forced to execute a singularity handshake dictated by their Betty number floors. And we looked at the 5 perfect symmetries of McKay's correspondence, dictating the absolute rules of reality through the E8-Dinkin diagram.
All the way down to the topological shape of human speech, governed by the amplitahedron and the schwa invariant.
It's a single, unified mathematical ledger of existence, a map of the geometric cage.
And so I want to leave you with a final, provocative thought to mull over as you go about your day. If the Gnosis ledger can use these fundamental topologies to perfectly encode the absolute limits of artificial intelligence, to perfectly predict the recurrence of discrete chaos, and to mathematically map the mechanical invariance of your own speech, what happens if someone feeds the exact topological shape of your daily routines and behaviors into this ledger?
That is the terrifying next step. If human organizations and human speech map perfectly to these geometries, then individual human lives must as well.
Could the shape of your entire life, your choices, your successes, your failures, be predicted by a geometric floor you don't even know you're standing on? Are you actually making free choices, or are you just navigating an invisible McKay quiver, making the only phase transitions the universe algebraically allows you to make?
It makes you wonder who or what is looking at the ultimate output of this math.
Exactly. The math is executing, the ledger is running. We just never realized that we were the ones trapped inside the equations.